In a small, quiet town nestled between rolling hills and vast fields, life moved at its own unhurried pace. Everyone knew each other by name, and the community thrived on simple joys: family dinners, weekend barbecues, and friendly chats over a coffee. Among these familiar faces was Jack, a hard-working mechanic who had become a beloved figure in the town. His garage, though modest and cluttered with tools, was always buzzing with activity. People trusted him not only because of his skill, but also because of his kindness. Whether it was fixing a flat tire or rebuilding an engine from scratch, Jack approached every job with dedication and care. Jack's love for cars wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. From the time he was a child, he had been fascinated by them. He would spend hours watching repair videos online, reading car magazines, and sketching designs of dream vehicles in his notebook. But as much as he adored working on cars, there was one thing that set his heart racing: luxury sports cars. Sleek, powerful, and breathtakingly beautiful, they represented everything Jack admired about engineering and design. However, owning one felt like a distant dream. As a mechanic earning a modest income, Jack lived paycheck to paycheck, saving what little he could while supporting himself and occasionally helping out his elderly neighbor with her bills. Despite the odds stacked against him, Jack never let go of his dream. Every night after finishing work at the garage, he'd sit in his tiny apartment with a cup of tea, flipping through glossy pages of car magazines. The images of shiny sports cars seemed almost magical under the dim light of his lamp. Sometimes, he'd imagine himself behind the wheel, cruising down open roads with the wind rushing past. It was during one of these late-night sessions that something unusual caught his eye: a classified ad posted online. A luxury sports car, barely used, and still gleaming like new, was being sold for less than half its original price. At first, Jack thought it must be too good to be true. Scams were common in such listings, especially when the deal sounded too tempting. But curiosity got the better of him, and he clicked on the link to learn more. The description promised perfection. The car had low mileage, no visible scratches, and came with all the bells and whistles you'd expect from a high-end model. Even more surprising was the seller's explanation for the reduced price. According to the post, the owner needed cash quickly due to unforeseen circumstances and was willing to part with the vehicle at a bargain rate. Jack's heart raced as he read the details again and again. Could this really be his chance? For years he had saved diligently, cutting back on luxuries and living frugally. Recently he had also inherited a modest sum from a distant relative, which he had carefully added to his savings account. Adding up the numbers in his head, Jack realized he might actually have enough to make the purchase. But doubt lingered in his mind. Buying a luxury car was a huge leap, especially for someone like him. What if the car turned out to be faulty? What if the seller disappeared after taking his money? These questions swirled in Jack's thoughts, keeping him awake long after he turned off his computer. Yet deep down, he couldn't ignore the spark of hope igniting within him. This wasn't just about fulfilling a childhood fantasy. It was about proving to himself that dreams could come true, even for someone who started with so little. By morning, Jack had made up his mind. He decided to visit the dealership listed in the ad, determined to see the car in person before making any decisions. Driving to the location, Jack felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The dealership was located in a nearby city, far removed from the simplicity of his hometown. When he arrived, the sight of the gleaming sports car took his breath away. It was parked proudly in the showroom, its polished surface reflecting the sunlight streaming through the large windows. Jack walked around it slowly, inspecting every detail. The leather seats were pristine, the dashboard gleamed with modern technology, and the engine purred softly when the salesperson started it up. Everything about the car screamed quality and craftsmanship. As Jack stood there admiring the vehicle, the salesperson asked casually how he planned to afford such an expensive purchase. Jack hesitated for a moment, then explained his situation. Honestly, he talked about his years of saving, the inheritance, and how this car represented the culmination of all his hard work. The salesperson listened intently, nodding along, though Jack noticed a flicker of skepticism in their eyes. Still, he pressed on. knowing that this was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. After some negotiation and careful consideration, Jack signed the paperwork, handing over nearly all of his savings in exchange for the keys to the car. As he drove away, gripping the steering wheel tightly, he felt a wave of emotions: pride, disbelief, and sheer joy. For the first time in his life, Jack felt unstoppable, as if the world had finally opened its doors to him. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of an extraordinary journey. Jack's drive home from the dealership was nothing short of surreal. For years he had dreamed of this moment, and now it was finally happening. The hum of the powerful engine beneath him, the smoothness of the leather steering wheel in his hands, and the way the car hugged the road as he accelerated. It all felt like a scene straight out of a movie. Every glance at the rearview mirror filled him with pride. This wasn't just any car. It was a symbol of everything he had worked for. As he cruised through the winding roads leading back to his town, Jack couldn't help but smile at the irony of it all. A mechanic who spent most of his life fixing other people's cars was now driving one that many could only dream of owning. When Jack pulled into his neighborhood, heads turned. Neighbors who were outside watering their lawns or walking their dogs stopped what they were doing to stare. Some recognized the car immediately, whispering to each other in disbelief. "Is that really Jack?" one of them muttered. Another shook their head, saying, "There's no way he can afford something like that." Word spread quickly, and within minutes a small crowd had gathered near Jack's driveway. His best friend Tom arrived first, his jaw dropping as he approached the car. "Are you serious right now?" Tom exclaimed, running his hand along the glossy finish. "This is insane. How did you even pull this off?" Jack chuckled nervously, still adjusting to the attention. He explained how he had saved for years, inherited some money, and stumbled upon an incredible deal. But despite his explanation, skepticism lingered in the air. People wanted to believe him, they truly did, but it was hard for them to reconcile the image of the humble mechanic they knew with the flashy sports car parked in front of them. Even Mrs. Henderson, the elderly neighbor who often brought Jack homemade cookies, looked puzzled. "It's beautiful, dear," she said kindly. "But are you sure this won't cause trouble? Folks around here aren't used to seeing, well, anything like this." Jack reassured her and everyone else that he had made the right decision. Deep down, though, he understood their concerns. Small towns thrived on familiarity, and anything too extravagant or out of the ordinary tended to raise eyebrows. Still, Jack reminded himself that he had earned this. He hadn't taken shortcuts or done anything dishonest. This was the result of years of sacrifice and hard work, and he refused to feel guilty about it. After exchanging a few more words with his neighbors, Jack finally retreated inside his house, leaving the car parked proudly in his driveway. Meanwhile, back at the dealership, things were far less celebratory. The sales manager, Mr. Carter, sat in his office staring at the paperwork from Jack's purchase. Something about the transaction gnawed at him. Sure, the car had been sold at a discounted price, but not so low that it should have been affordable to someone like Jack. Mechanics weren't exactly known for their wealth, and the idea that a man living paycheck to paycheck could suddenly come up with enough cash to buy a luxury vehicle seemed suspicious. Mr. Carter replayed the conversation in his mind, the way Jack had hesitated when asked about his finances, the vague mention of savings and inheritance. It didn't add up. Determined to get answers, Mr. Carter called over one of his junior salespeople, Lisa, who had assisted Jack earlier. "Did he say anything unusual while you were handling the sale?" Mr. Carter asked sharply. Lisa shrugged, recalling the interaction. "Not really. He seemed nervous, but I figured that was normal for someone making such a big purchase. He mentioned saving for years and getting some money from family, but that's it." Her response did little to ease Mr. Carter's growing unease. Saving for years from what? Fixing oil leaks and changing brake pads? He snapped, his voice rising slightly. Lisa flinched but said nothing further. As the day wore on, Mr. Carter's suspicions grew stronger. He began imagining scenarios. Perhaps Jack had stolen the money, or maybe he was involved in something illegal. Maybe the car itself was stolen, and Jack was unknowingly part of a larger scheme. Each theory sounded more dramatic than the last, but none of them seemed impossible. Finally, unable to shake off his doubts, Mr. Carter picked up the phone and dialed the local police station. When the officer on the other end answered, Mr. Carter launched into his concerns. "We may have a problem here," he said gravely. "A guy came in today and bought one of our high-end sports cars. But there's no way he could afford it legitimately. I think we need to look into this." The call set off a chain reaction. Within hours, 2 officers were dispatched to track down Jack. They found him at his garage tinkering with an old sedan that belonged to one of his regular customers. When the officers approached, Jack looked up, surprised to see them. "Can I help you?" he asked, wiping grease-stained hands on a rag. One of the officers stepped forward, his expression stern. "Sir, we need you to come with us. There are some questions regarding your recent purchase, a luxury sports car. We'd like to clarify a few details." For a moment, Jack froze, unsure of what to say. Then realization dawned on him. Someone must have reported him. Panic bubbled in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Of course," he replied evenly, locking up the garage before following the officers to their patrol car. As they drove away, Jack glanced back at his garage and the shiny sports car parked nearby. He couldn't believe this was happening. All he had done was buy a car, a legal transaction, and yet here he was being treated like a criminal at the police station. Jack was led to a small interrogation room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the table where he sat. An officer entered shortly after, placing a folder in front of him. "Let's start with the basics," the officer said, opening the file. "How did you come by the funds to purchase the vehicle?" Jack took a deep breath, steadying himself. He recounted his story once again, the years of saving, the inheritance, the classified ad that caught his eye. He even offered to show proof of his bank statements and provide contact information for his accountant. But as he spoke, he noticed the skeptical looks exchanged between the officers. They clearly didn't trust him. Hours passed, and Jack grew increasingly frustrated. Here he was, sitting in a cold, sterile room, explaining the same thing over and over. He had done nothing wrong, yet he was being treated like a suspect. Meanwhile, news of his arrest, or rather, detention for questioning, began spreading throughout the town. Friends and neighbors flocked to the station, demanding answers. Tom showed up first, banging on the door and shouting, "You've got the wrong guy. Jack wouldn't hurt a fly." Others joined in, voicing their support. Even Mrs. Henderson arrived, clutching her cane and insisting that Jack was the kindest soul she knew. Back at the dealership, whispers circulated among the staff. Some defended Mr. Carter's decision to call the police, arguing that caution was necessary. Others, however, criticized him for jumping to conclusions without proper evidence. Lisa, in particular, felt uneasy. She had interacted with Jack during the sale and found him polite and genuine. Now, hearing that he was being questioned because of a hunch made her question her own judgment. "What if we messed up?" she wondered aloud during a quiet moment in the break room. Her colleague nodded grimly. "If it turns out he's innocent, we're going to look terrible." By the time the investigation reached its conclusion, Jack's name had already been dragged through the mud. Social media buzzed with speculation, and local news outlets picked up the story. Headlines screamed phrases like, "Mechanic arrested over luxury car purchase," and "Small-town man faces scrutiny for big spending spree." Jack's friends and supporters rallied around him, organizing protests outside the police station, and flooding social media with messages of solidarity. Through it all, Jack remained composed, trusting that the truth would eventually come out, and it did. After reviewing his financial records and speaking with his accountant, the police confirmed that Jack had acquired the car legally. There was no fraud, no stolen money, and no shady dealings, just a hard-working man who had finally achieved his dream. As the officers released him from custody, Jack felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief that the ordeal was over, but anger at how quickly people had assumed the worst about him. Little did he know, this incident was just the beginning of a much larger reckoning, one that would force the entire town, and especially the dealership, to confront their biases and reconsider what they thought they knew about dreams, ambition, and the limits of possibility. The moment Jack stepped out of the police station, blinking in the bright sunlight, he was met with a wave of cheers and applause. His friends, neighbors, and even strangers who had heard about his story stood gathered around, holding signs that read, "Believe in Dreams," and "Justice for Jack." Tom rushed forward, clapping him on the back. "You did it, buddy. You proved them wrong." Mrs. Henderson shuffled up next, her cane tapping against the pavement, and handed him a plate of freshly baked cookies. "Take these," she said firmly. "You deserve something sweet after all this nonsense." Despite the warmth of the support surrounding him, Jack couldn't shake off the heaviness in his chest. He had spent hours inside the cold, sterile interrogation room, answering the same questions over and over again while officers scrutinized every detail of his life. They had combed through his bank statements, contacted his accountant, and even verified the inheritance he had received from his distant relative. In the end, they found nothing suspicious, no hidden accounts, no illegal activities, no red flags of any kind. Everything checked out, yet the damage had already been done. For hours, Jack had been treated like a criminal, doubted by people who didn't know him and judged based on assumptions rather than facts. As word spread that Jack had been cleared of any wrongdoing, the mood in the town shifted dramatically. What had started as curiosity quickly turned into outrage. People were furious, not at Jack, but at the dealership that had called the police in the first place. Social media exploded with posts criticizing the dealership's actions. Hashtags, like Angry Stand with Jack and Boy Dreams Errant Crimes trended locally, drawing attention not just within the town but also from neighboring communities. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a classic case of prejudice and classism. Reporters descended upon the small town, eager to interview Jack and hear his side of the story. For Mr. Carter, the sales manager at the dealership, the backlash was swift and brutal. The morning after Jack's release, he arrived at work to find protesters gathered outside the showroom, holding placards and chanting slogans. Some of them were locals who knew Jack personally. Others were complete strangers who had seen the news online and felt compelled to speak out. Inside the dealership, phones rang nonstop with angry callers demanding answers. Customers canceled appointments, vowing never to return until the issue was resolved. Even employees began questioning their loyalty to the company, whispering among themselves about whether they wanted to be associated with such controversy. Lisa, the junior salesperson who had assisted Jack during his purchase, watched the chaos unfold with growing unease. She had defended Jack when questioned by her colleagues earlier, insisting that he seemed honest and sincere. Now, seeing how badly things had spiraled out of control, she couldn't help but feel partially responsible. If only Mr. Carter hadn't jumped to conclusions so quickly. If only someone had given Jack the benefit of the doubt. None of this would have happened. During a particularly tense staff meeting, Lisa finally spoke up. "We messed up," she said bluntly, addressing the entire team. "Jack is innocent and we made him look guilty because of our own biases. That's not okay." Her words hung heavily in the air, leaving everyone silent. Mr. Carter, sitting at the head of the table, looked pale and visibly shaken. He had always prided himself on running a reputable business, one built on trust and integrity, but now those values seemed to crumble under the weight of public scrutiny. Realizing there was no way to undo what had been done, he decided to take action. Later that afternoon, he held a press conference outside the dealership, standing before cameras and microphones with a prepared statement. "First and foremost, I want to apologize to Jack," Mr. Carter began, his voice steady but tinged with regret. "What happened was unacceptable, and I deeply regret the role our dealership played in causing him distress. We acted out of an abundance of caution, but in hindsight it's clear that we should have trusted him instead of jumping to conclusions. Jack is a hard-working individual who achieved his dream through years of dedication and sacrifice. Instead of celebrating that achievement, we subjected him to unnecessary suspicion and hardship. For that, I am truly sorry." The apology went viral almost instantly. While some praised Mr. Carter for owning up to his mistake, Others dismissed it as too little, too late. Critics argued that an apology wasn't enough to undo the harm caused, not just to Jack, but to the broader message it sent about judging people based on appearances or socioeconomic status. Many pointed out that if Jack had been someone wealthier or more privileged, the situation might have unfolded very differently. The incident became a talking point in discussions about classism and stereotypes, sparking debates far beyond the confines of the small town. Back at home, Jack tried to process everything that had happened. On one hand, he was relieved that the truth had come out, and grateful for the overwhelming support he had received from his community. On the other hand, he couldn't ignore the lingering bitterness. He had worked tirelessly his entire life to build a reputation as an honest and dependable person, only to have it tarnished overnight because of someone else's assumptions. It wasn't fair, and it left him feeling vulnerable in a way he hadn't expected. That evening, Jack sat on his porch, staring at the sports car parked in his driveway. Despite everything, he still loved the car. It represented freedom, ambition, and the culmination of years of effort. But now, it also carried the weight of judgment and misunderstanding. As he sipped a cup of tea, Tom joined him, pulling up a chair. "You okay?" Tom asked gently, breaking the silence. Jack sighed, rubbing his temples. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'm glad it's over, but it feels like people are looking at me differently now. Like they're waiting for me to mess up or prove them right." Tom nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, I get that. But you know what? This whole thing has shown everyone exactly who you are. You didn't lash out, you didn't try to hide anything. You stayed calm and let the truth speak for itself. That takes guts, man. And honestly, it makes you even more respected than before." Jack smiled faintly, appreciating the sentiment. Still, he knew that rebuilding trust would take time. Not just for him, but for the entire town. In the days that followed, the protests outside the dealership continued, though they grew smaller as the initial fury subsided. Mr. Carter reached out to Jack personally, offering to refund his money or exchange the car for any model he desired. Jack politely declined both options, choosing instead to keep the vehicle he had rightfully earned. However, he did agree to meet with Mr. Carter privately to discuss ways the dealership could make amends, not just to him but to the community as a whole. During their conversation, Jack shared his thoughts candidly. "This isn't just about me," he said firmly. "It's about how easy it is to judge someone without knowing their story. If anything good can come out of this, maybe it's a reminder to give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's a chance to start conversations about fairness and respect." Mr. Carter listened intently, nodding along. By the end of their talk, he promised to implement changes within the dealership, including hosting workshops on unconscious bias and partnering with local charities to support aspiring mechanics from underprivileged backgrounds. As the dust began to settle, Jack returned to his routine, repairing cars and helping customers as he always had. But something had changed, not just in him, but in the town itself. People looked at Jack differently now, not with suspicion, but with admiration. His story had become a symbol of resilience, reminding everyone that dreams were worth pursuing no matter how impossible they might seem. And though the road ahead wouldn't be without challenges, Jack faced it with renewed determination, knowing that he had already overcome the greatest obstacle of all, proving that he deserved to stand tall, unapologetically proud of who he was and what he had achieved. The days following Jack's meeting with Mr. Carter brought a mix of emotions for the mechanic. On one hand, he felt a sense of closure, knowing that his innocence had been proven and acknowledged by everyone involved. On the other hand, he couldn't ignore the lingering frustration over how quickly people had doubted him. The incident had forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, how easily assumptions could turn into accusations, and how fragile trust could be when faced with something unfamiliar or unexpected. Despite this, Jack refused to let bitterness take root in his heart. Instead, he channeled his energy into rebuilding not just his own life, but also the fractured relationships within the community. He began reaching out to those who had supported him during the ordeal, thanking them personally for standing by his side. Whether it was Mrs. Henderson bringing over another batch of cookies or Tom organizing a small gathering at the local diner, Jack made sure to express his gratitude. These acts of kindness helped mend some of the wounds caused by the controversy, reminding everyone of the power of compassion and unity. Word of Jack's humility and grace spread quickly, earning him even more respect than before. People started seeing him not just as the town's trusted mechanic, but as a role model, a man who had risen above adversity without losing his integrity. Local businesses, inspired by his story, began offering discounts to customers who mentioned Jack's name, turning his struggle into a symbol of hope. One shop owner even hung a sign in her window that read, "Dream big like Jack," which became a popular photo spot for residents and visitors alike. Meanwhile, the dealership worked tirelessly to repair its damaged reputation. True to his word, Mr. Carter implemented several initiatives aimed at fostering greater understanding and inclusivity. He invited experts to conduct workshops on unconscious bias for all employees, ensuring that no customer would ever face the same treatment Jack had endured. Additionally, the dealership partnered with local charities to create a scholarship fund for aspiring mechanics from underprivileged backgrounds. Named the Jack Initiative, the program provided financial assistance, mentorship opportunities, and hands-on training to young individuals passionate about pursuing careers in automotive repair. Jack was deeply moved when Mr. Carter approached him with the idea of naming the initiative after him. At first he hesitated, feeling unworthy of such an honor. But Mr. Carter insisted, explaining that Jack's story embodied everything the program hoped to achieve: resilience, determination, and breaking barriers. Reluctantly, Jack agreed, realizing that accepting the gesture wasn't about vanity, it was about using his experience to inspire others. As news of the scholarship spread, interest poured in from across the region. Dozens of applications flooded the dealership, each telling a unique story of hardship and ambition. Jack volunteered to help review the submissions, spending evenings poring over essays and recommendation letters. Reading about the dreams of these young men and women reignited his passion for cars and reminded him why he had fallen in love with mechanics in the first place. It also gave him a renewed sense of purpose, to ensure that no one else would have to fight as hard as he did to chase their dreams. One evening, while going through the applications, Jack came across one that stood out. The applicant, a teenager, named Mia, wrote about growing up in foster care and finding solace in tinkering with old bicycles and lawnmowers. Her essay described how she dreamed of becoming a master technician someday, despite having no formal education or resources to pursue it. Something about Mia's words resonated deeply with Jack. He remembered his own childhood, when he had spent hours watching repair videos and sketching car designs in his notebook, unsure if anyone would ever take him seriously. Determined to give Mia the chance he wished he'd had, Jack advocated strongly for her selection as one of the scholarship recipients. When Mia received the news, she burst into tears of joy. She visited the dealership with her caseworker to thank everyone, personally, her eyes shining with gratitude. Meeting Jack for the first time, she shyly admitted, "I've heard so much about you. You're kind of my hero." Jack chuckled, brushing off the compliment, but inside, he felt a swell of pride. For the first time since the controversy, he realized that his journey hadn't just been about proving himself. It had been about creating opportunities for others to shine. The positive changes didn't stop there. Inspired by Jack's story, the town decided to host a charity event to celebrate his triumph and raise funds for the scholarship program. Organizers transformed the local park into a vibrant hub of activity, complete with food trucks, live music, and a classic car show featuring vehicles donated by residents. Jack naturally played a central role in the festivities. Not only did he showcase his prized sports car, but he also led a panel discussion on overcoming obstacles and pursuing dreams against all odds. His candidness and humor captivated the audience, leaving many in tears and others cheering loudly. During the event, Jack took a moment to reflect on how far he had come. Just weeks ago, he had been sitting in a police station, defending himself against baseless accusations. Now, he stood surrounded by friends, family, and strangers who believed in him, not just as a mechanic, but as a person. The contrast was staggering, yet it filled him with hope. He realized that while the past couldn't be erased, it could be reshaped into something meaningful. Every challenge he had faced had taught him valuable lessons about resilience, empathy, and the importance of staying true to oneself. By the end of the day, the charity event had raised thousands of dollars for the scholarship fund, exceeding everyone's expectations. As fireworks lit up the night sky, Jack looked around at the smiling faces of his community. He thought about Mia, whose future now held endless possibilities thanks to the support of strangers who believed in her potential. He thought about the dealership, once seen as the antagonist in his story, now working tirelessly to make amends and uplift others. And he thought about himself, the boy who had once dreamed of luxury cars while fixing broken-down sedans, now standing proudly beside the very vehicle that had sparked so much change. Though the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, Jack knew he was ready to face whatever challenges lay in store. He had proven to himself and to the world that dreams were worth fighting for, no matter how impossible they might seem. More importantly, he had shown that success wasn't just about personal achievement, it was about lifting others up along the way. As the final firework exploded overhead, painting the sky with bursts of color, Jack smiled to himself. This wasn't just the end of one chapter, it was the beginning of something much bigger. The aftermath of the charity event left a lasting impression on the town. What had started as a celebration of Jack's journey quickly evolved into a movement, a collective effort to challenge stereotypes, support dreams, and foster inclusivity. The success of the Jack Initiative Scholarship Program became a beacon of hope not just for aspiring mechanics, but for anyone who felt overlooked or underestimated. News of the initiative spread far beyond the small town, drawing attention from neighboring cities and even national media outlets. Journalists flocked to interview Jack, eager to capture the essence of his story and understand how one man's resilience had sparked such widespread change. For Jack, the sudden influx of attention was both humbling and overwhelming. Cameras followed him wherever he went, capturing candid moments at his garage, during community events, and even while he worked on restoring an old motorcycle in his spare time. Reporters asked endless questions about his life, his struggles, and his vision for the future. At first, Jack found it difficult to adjust to the spotlight. He wasn't used to being the center of attention and worried that people might misunderstand his intentions, that they'd see him as seeking fame rather than simply trying to make a difference. But as he spoke with more journalists and attendees, at various events, he realized that sharing his story could inspire others to believe in themselves and their potential. One particular interview stood out. A young reporter named Sarah, who had grown up in a similar small town, asked Jack a question that caught him off guard. What advice would you give to someone who feels like the world is against them? Jack paused, reflecting deeply before answering. I'd tell them to keep going, he said earnestly. Life isn't always fair, and there will be times when people doubt you or try to bring you down. But if you stay true to yourself and focus on what really matters, your values, your goals, and the people who support you, you'll find a way to rise above it all. And remember, every setback is an opportunity to learn and grow. His words resonated deeply, not just with Sarah, but with countless viewers who watched the segment later. Clips of the interview went viral online, earning millions of views and sparking conversations about perseverance and self-belief. People from all walks of life reached out to Jack, some sharing their own struggles, others expressing gratitude for his message of hope. Among the messages was one from Mia, the scholarship recipient whose dream of becoming a mechanic had been reignited by Jack's advocacy. She wrote to thank him again, this time including a photo of herself standing proudly next to her first completed engine rebuild. Seeing her progress filled Jack with immense pride, reinforcing his belief that helping others was the most rewarding part of his journey. Meanwhile, the dealership continued its efforts to rebuild trust within the community. Mr. Carter, determined to make amends, took bold steps to ensure that the mistakes of the past wouldn't be repeated. In addition to sponsoring local events and expanding the scholarship program, he introduced new policies aimed at promoting transparency, and fairness. Every customer who walked through the doors was greeted warmly, regardless of their background or appearance. Employees underwent regular training sessions on empathy and communication, ensuring that no one felt judged or unwelcome. Slowly but surely, the dealership transformed from a source of controversy into a pillar of support for the town. The changes didn't go unnoticed. Customers began returning, praising the improved atmosphere and service. One day, a young couple entered the showroom, hesitant but hopeful. They explained that they were looking for a reliable car to start a small delivery business, but feared they wouldn't qualify for financing due to their limited income. Instead of dismissing them, Lisa, the same salesperson who had assisted Jack, sat down with them to explore affordable options. By the end of the visit, the couple drove away in a practical yet sturdy vehicle, tears of gratitude streaming down their faces. Stories like these became commonplace, further solidifying the dealership's reputation as a place where dreams could take shape. As weeks turned into months, Jack noticed subtle shifts in the way people interacted with each other. Conversations around town often revolved around themes of ambition, kindness, and breaking barriers. Parents encouraged their children to pursue unconventional paths, citing Jack's story as proof that hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle. Teachers incorporated lessons about resilience into their classrooms, using real-life examples to inspire students. Even local businesses adopted slogans emphasizing inclusivity and empowerment, creating a ripple effect that touched every corner of the community. Jack himself remained grounded despite the growing recognition. He continued working at his garage, fixing cars with the same dedication and care that had earned him his reputation. However, he also embraced his role as a mentor and advocate, dedicating time each week to speak with aspiring mechanics and offer guidance. Many of them came from challenging backgrounds, much like Mia, and looked up to Jack as a source of inspiration. He listened patiently to their stories, offering advice based on his own experiences while reminding them never to lose sight of their dreams. One afternoon, as Jack tinkered with an old sedan in his garage, Tom stopped by with an unexpected visitor, Mr. Carter. The two men exchanged awkward glances before Mr. Carter cleared his throat nervously. "Jack, I know we've come a long way since, well, everything that happened," he began hesitantly. "But I wanted to personally invite you to speak at our annual employee conference. Your story has already inspired so many people, and I think it would mean a lot to our team to hear directly from you." Jack raised an eyebrow, surprised by the request. After a moment of consideration, he nodded. "Sure, I'll do it," he replied with a smile. "But only if you promise to stop apologizing every time you see me." Mr. Carter chuckled, visibly relieved, and extended his hand. "Deal," he said firmly. The handshake marked a turning point in their relationship, transforming lingering tension into mutual respect. When the day of the conference arrived, Jack stood nervously behind the podium, scanning the room filled with dealership employees. For a brief moment, memories of the interrogation room flashed in his mind, but he quickly pushed them aside. Taking a deep breath, he began speaking, sharing his journey from humble beginnings to owning his dream car, and everything in between. He spoke openly about the challenges he faced, the importance of believing in oneself, and the value of treating others with fairness and dignity. By the time he finished, the room erupted in applause, with many attendees rising to their feet. Afterward, several employees approached Jack to thank him for his honesty and wisdom. Some shared personal stories of overcoming adversity, while others expressed admiration for his ability to forgive and move forward. One woman, in particular, stood out. She confessed that she had initially agreed with Mr. Carter's decision to call the police, but now regretted her judgment. "Your story made me realize how wrong I was," she admitted tearfully. "Thank you for showing us that everyone deserves a chance no matter where they come from." Leaving the conference, Jack felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He hadn't set out to change the world. He had simply wanted to live his life authentically and chase his dreams. Yet in doing so, he had ignited a chain reaction of positivity and transformation that extended far beyond anything he could have imagined. As he drove home in his sports car, the setting sun casting golden hues across the horizon, Jack reflected on how far he and the entire town had come. The road ahead still held uncertainties, but one thing was certain. Together, they had proven that kindness, understanding, and resilience could turn even the darkest moments into opportunities for growth and unity. Months had passed since the charity event and Jack's speech at the dealership conference, but the impact of his story continued to ripple through the town and beyond. What had begun as a personal journey for Jack had transformed into a movement that inspired countless individuals to pursue their dreams, no matter how improbable they seemed. The Jack Initiative Scholarship Program flourished, attracting applications not just from local students but from aspiring mechanics across the country. Each recipient brought their own unique story of struggle and ambition, adding new layers to the legacy Jack had unintentionally created. For Jack, life settled into a rhythm that balanced humility with purpose. He still worked long hours at his garage, fixing cars and solving mechanical puzzles with the same passion that had driven him since childhood. But now, his days were punctuated by moments of connection, whether it was mentoring a scholarship student, speaking at community events, or simply chatting with customers who stopped by to share how his story had touched their lives. These interactions reminded him daily of the power of perseverance and the importance of lifting others up. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze outside his garage, Jack received an unexpected letter. It was from Mia, the first scholarship recipient whose journey had become intertwined with his own. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note and a photograph. The picture showed Mia standing proudly beside a sleek, restored sports car, the very vehicle she had spent months working on under the guidance of her mentor. Her smile radiated pure joy, and her eyes sparkled with confidence. The note read, "Dear Jack, I don't know where to begin except to say thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, for showing me that hard work pays off, and for proving that kindness can change the world. This car is more than just metal and wheels. It's proof that dreams really do come true if you fight for them. Because of you, I've found my place in this world, and I'll never stop paying it forward. With love and gratitude, Mia." Tears welled up in Jack's eyes as he read the words. He pinned the photo to the bulletin board above his workbench, right next to sketches of car designs he had drawn years ago. Every time he glanced at it, he felt a surge of pride, not just for Mia, but for everyone who had dared to dream because of his example. Meanwhile, the town itself underwent a quiet transformation. Inspired by Jack's resilience, residents began embracing opportunities to support one another in meaningful ways. Local businesses collaborated to create a dream fund, pooling resources to help entrepreneurs launch startups or pursue creative endeavors. Schools introduced programs focused on career exploration, inviting professionals like Jack to speak to students about overcoming challenges and finding fulfillment in unconventional paths. Even the annual Fall Festival took on a new theme: Believe in Yourself, complete with workshops, art displays, and performances celebrating individuality and ambition. The dealership, once a source of controversy, became a cornerstone of this cultural shift. Under Mr. Carter's leadership, it evolved into a hub for innovation and inclusivity. Employees volunteered their time to teach free automotive repair classes at community centers, empowering people to learn valuable skills. The showroom hosted monthly events showcasing custom-built vehicles created by local enthusiasts, turning the space into a celebration of creativity and craftsmanship. And the scholarship program expanded, offering internships and apprenticeships to give young mechanics hands-on experience in the industry. As winter approached, the town prepared for its biggest event yet, a gala honoring Jack and the impact of the Jack Initiative. Organizers rented out the largest hall in the area, decorating it with strings of fairy lights and banners emblazoned with motivational quotes. Attendees included scholarship recipients, local leaders, and even representatives from national organizations advocating for vocational education. When Jack arrived wearing a suit borrowed from Tom, who insisted it made him look classy, he was greeted with thunderous applause. During the ceremony, several speakers took the stage to share heartfelt tributes. Mia delivered a moving speech, recounting how Jack's belief in her had changed the trajectory of her life. A representative from the Dream Fund announced plans to establish a permanent endowment in Jack's name, ensuring that future generations would benefit from his vision, and Mr. Carter presented Jack with a plaque engraved with the words, "For inspiring us all to dream bigger." When it was finally Jack's turn to speak, he stepped up to the microphone, visibly overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and gratitude. For a moment, he simply stood there, taking in the sea of smiling faces before him. Then, clearing his throat, he began, "I never set out to inspire anyone," he admitted, his voice steady, but tinged with emotion. "All I wanted was to fix cars, save my money, and maybe someday own something I loved. But life has a funny way of surprising you. Through every challenge I faced, from being doubted and judged to having my integrity questioned, I learned that our struggles don't define us. What defines us is how we respond to those struggles. Do we let them break us? Or do we use them as stepping stones to become better versions of ourselves?" He paused, scanning the room. "This isn't my story anymore. It's ours. It belongs to everyone who has ever been told they couldn't achieve something, only to prove the doubters wrong. It belongs to Mia, to the scholarship recipients, to the teachers and mentors who guide young minds, and to every person here tonight who believes in the power of dreams. So my advice to all of you is simple. Keep dreaming, keep fighting, and most importantly, keep helping others along the way. Because when we lift each other up, there's no limit to what we can accomplish." The room erupted in cheers, with many wiping away tears. As Jack stepped down from the stage, he was surrounded by hugs, handshakes, and words of gratitude. Among the crowd was Mrs. Henderson, clutching her cane and beaming with pride. "You've done good, dear," she said, patting his arm. "Real good." In the weeks that followed, Jack returned to his routine, though nothing felt quite the same. He carried with him the knowledge that his actions had sparked lasting change, a reminder that even the smallest acts of courage could create waves far beyond what anyone might expect. On quiet evenings, he would sit on his porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon while listening to the distant hum of engines. His prized sports car sat gleaming in the driveway, a testament to everything he had overcome. But Jack knew the true measure of success wasn't the car itself. It was the lives he had touched and the dreams he had helped ignite. As he looked around at the thriving community he called home, he realized that his journey was far from over. There would always be more challenges to face, more obstacles to overcome, and more people to inspire. And Jack, with his unwavering determination and generous spirit, was ready for whatever came next. Because in the end, it wasn't about the destination. It was about the road traveled, the lessons learned, and the countless hearts touched along the way. And for Jack, that made every twist and turn worth it.